listeners and readers of AwardsWatch.com. This is the Awards Watch Podcast, episode 301. I'm your executive editor, Ryan McQuade. Joining me today is our editor-in-chief, Erik Anderson.
Hello, hello, hello.
And Karen Peterson.
Hi.
We're here to talk about the latest film this weekend, Zach Cregger's Weapons. We're here to talk about Weapons. And this will be a spoiler-filled conversation. So if you haven't seen Weapons yet, why are you listening to this in the first place? Like, this is one of those films.
No, go ahead and listen. No.
You want to just spoil it for yourself?
And go watch the movie and then come back and listen again.
Well,
See,
I mean,
then we get two views.
yeah, but then people are going to go, well, you spoiled the movie for us. And it's like, well, you shouldn't have listened in the first place.
Well,
right? Am I wrong?
No, that's why we're telling them that it's
a good movie is spoiler proof. So,
oh, well.
So maybe you're right. Maybe they shouldn't listen first.
It's one of the more highly anticipated films, I think, of the year, just because I think it's had a great marketing campaign and because it's got a lot of secrets behind it and a lot of things to discuss. I think Warner Brothers actually has done a really good job of not showing too much, or at least hinting at things in the. I think, Erik, you and I were talking about this, hinting at things that are in the trailer that are quick little flashes. And then as they pop up in the film, they're little surprises as to where they are actually at in the entire plot of everything. But
kind of. Because
but
I actually felt like, I mean, I love the trailers too.
I didn't see like the last trailer. I only saw like the first trailer. So
I kept waiting for the moments in the trailers to happen. And some of them don't happen till really very close to the end. So there was a little bit of maybe the wrong kind of anticipation. I love a good trailer, but at the same time, I was a little bit like, well, when is this part? When are they jumping out the window? What's going on?
Exactly.
I also think they should not have showed Amy Madigan at all in the trailers.
I didn't remember her in the trailers.
She just has one of those very quick flashes, but I was it was ingrained in my brain.
See, I didn't remember it at all. And I honestly, until I think it was at the beginning when they had like the cast or whatever, I didn't even know she was in the film. So maybe that was just me personally just blocking it out. But anyway, Karen, sorry.
I personally think they should have never done another, like a full trailer. I think that teaser was so effective. Yeah. They should have just left it at that, trusted it, because that first teaser, I was just like, oh my gosh, I have to see this movie. I was really excited about it. I was a little bit more, my expectations and my excitement were a little bit more suppressed, subdued, I guess, maybe. Tempered, that's the word. Thank you. When I saw a full trailer, because I was just like, oh, first of all, when I first saw the teaser, I didn't realize that it was Zach Cregger. So I don't know. Like, I just didn't connect that. And then when I realized, oh wait, this is the guy that did Barbarian, I was like, okay, maybe. But then when I saw that full trailer, I was just like, oh, I'm not as excited about this as I was with the teaser.
Well, that was what I was going to ask you guys before we started talking about Weapons, was your relationship with Cregger and seeing Barbarian, and because that was kind of his big breakout in our sort of COVID times a couple of years ago, and it's kind of become like a little bit of, it was a divisive film at the time, but a film that I think a lot of people got to watch at home and first experience him. And this is, I think, going to be the first time that a lot of them experience him in the theater. Karen, were you kind of mixed on Barbarian when it came out?
I was. The first time I watched it, I was like, oh yeah, this movie's really fun. I think the first half of it is very effective. Once you go kind of through the looking glass into the tunnels down below the house, then I think that as soon as the movie starts to explain itself, it falls apart.
Okay.
And on subsequent viewings, I've enjoyed it less than I did that first time. The first time I watched it, I was like, this movie's really fun. I really like what this filmmaker is doing. But as I've watched it more, I'm like, it doesn't work as well for me.
Erik, what did you think of Barbarian? Have you only seen it? How many times have you seen it? Have you seen it a couple times?
Twice, I think. Okay. I'm a huge fan of it. I love the structure of it, and that it's like 3 different movies and really kind of throws you for a loop. And I mean, I was a fan of his from Whitest Kids You Know, which I think is one of the funniest sketch comedy shows ever. And it's just one of those things where here's a person that has had uh, a a career that doesn't jibe with the two movies that we've seen here. I mean, he's made 3 movies, so maybe the first one is a little bit closer to that. But Barbarian and Weapons are just one of those. Oh, okay, you are a freak. You're an absolute. You're a weirdo.
I didn't know much about Cregger before I saw Barbarian. I just sort of heard all the hype for it, and I watched it at home, and I think I was a little bit more where you are at, Karen. I thought that the first half of that, it was just this really great building of tension and really grounded in character. Then we start going down the tunnels and it unfolds into more, and it was and I think it goes into some very silly places by the end, especially in the second act. But I do think also there's just the character stuff in that film before it gets to sort of the supernatural horror stuff is actually really good. And overall, I liked it because it wasn't. I'm trying to. My taste of horror right now is I'm getting really tired of the grief, trauma, porn loving A24 neon independent horror vibes that has been building over the last 5 to 10 years, where it feels like on and on and on the same regurgitated themes and ideas are sort of poured into these films, and they're all done on the same sort of palette. And someone like Jordan Peele, for example, who is, I mean, very much a Cregger's blueprint of this comedian who splashes onto the horror scene, has some dark humor inside of his films, some interesting political commentary, social commentary in there, as well as also just making really entertaining kind of throwback films. Is something that I much more gravitate towards, and so I kind of felt like with Barbarian, it was a similar in terms of that vein of film. And then the glow up of that being like a $4.5 million film to now what is Weapons, which is 10 times that budget. It's what kind of used to happen in Hollywood, which is that we would allow people to build up to a certain level and do it with mostly creative and original ideas that were spawned from homages of the past. And I think that that's where we could start with Weapons, which is this is a film he's talked about that's very personal to him. He's had a lot of interviews where he's tried to go back and forth about talking about what the themes are of this film, what aren't the themes of this film. But I think once you give it into the hands of an audience, it becomes what an audience sees. And it's very interesting, watching this movie is this buildup and this hype for a studio that's done really well this year and marketed. And now we are talking about this film. And Karen, I'm curious because people are calling this a masterpiece. We have a review on the website by Griffin Schiller, whose posts are everywhere, and Griffin's called this it's Magnolia meets The Shining meets Pulp Fiction meets all these different films. It's the masterpiece, and everyone's 5 out of 5. But I don't think we're all going to agree with that here today. Karen, your thoughts now after fully seeing Weapons?
I love Griffin Schiller. I think he's a great person.
We're not shaming Griffin or anything.
Not at all, but I fully disagree with his review, which I read last night. I do not think this movie is a masterpiece. I think the attempts to homage things like Magnolia and The Shining are not met with any sort of depth from Cregger. I think that there are a lot of visuals used in this movie that are just kind of there, that he never fully engages with and doesn't do anything deeper with them. It's a movie that is just about the shock. To me, this is all my perception. This is a movie about the shock and just like surprises without any real like it's all on the surface. It doesn't really go deeper into these themes. And like I've read a couple of interviews where Cregger's basically saying like, I can't wait for the audience to tell me what my movie means. Like and that just feels to me like validating, I guess, in a weird way, because I feel like my experience with it was that I didn't feel like he really intended anything more than just to be shocking. And the thing about horror, everybody knows this, horror is very subjective. What scares you, Ryan, is not necessarily going to be what scares me. What gets under one person's skin is not going to affect other people the same way. And it was really interesting. The theater that I was in, I saw this just with regular people yesterday. And when the movie was over, the reactions in that entire room, and I had not really read a lot of critics' reviews before going into this. I'd wait until after. The audience that I was with, it felt like everybody was on the same page. I was in the restroom afterwards and I heard one girl say, well, what'd you think of that movie? Was it good? And she's like, fuck no, it was terrible. And I was just like, oh, okay, cool. And then I started reading the reviews and I'm like, 97% on Rotten Tomatoes. What is happening here? I was just very shocked by this. And I think it's because I went in really wanting, you have a title, Weapons. That's such an evocative title. Like we were talking about those trailers, there's some really interesting stuff there. There's really great cast. Mm-hmm. And I was just really looking forward to some sort of exploration of these themes. And all I got ultimately was a couple of really violent deaths and not much more than that. Also, the narrator lies at the beginning of the movie for no reason. There's just all these weird things that I just thought, I don't understand what this movie is trying to do, what it's trying to say beyond just some gruesome visuals. So I did not enjoy it.
Gotcha. All right, Erik, your thoughts on the film?
I mean, I loved it. I did want to, Carrie, you just mentioned something that the narrator lies at the beginning. And mm-hmm. Just for clarification, are you saying when she says that the kids never came back?
Yeah.
Okay. Because that's something I've been thinking about, that specific line. Not because I think she was an unreliable narrator, but when we do get to the end where the kids have been returned and she says that some of them after a year have finally begun to talk. When she says that they never returned, in my mind, this was a psychological, emotional return, not a physical return that she's talking about, because she is talking and coming from a place of knowing several years after these events have happened and after they've been returned. So her point of view is, well, you could either see it as an unreliable narrator, but I don't think that's what's being established with her. That was my perception. Because when we do get to when they are returned and they are pretty much in a vegetative state still, unlike the adults that are able to kind of snap out of it a lot quicker, which there's a whole conversation about that too, about being able to come back from a trauma response and experience quicker or much slower. So what I really did love about this is kind of what I really loved about Barbarian, is that because it is really kind of multiple movies that unfold every, let's say, 1/3 or so into it. I mean, Barbarian is not about a terrible Airbnb experience. I mean, it is obviously, but it's not a condemnation of Airbnb, which it seems like, from the trailers, you're like, oh, it's going to be just like sort of this thing. And Weapons very heavily implies gun violence and, children dying in schools. And that is not really what it is. You have obviously the dream sequence of Josh Brolin and the AK-47 in the sky, which is incredible because it's on the nose in only a way that it is Josh Brolin's dream. It's and it works for me. So this isn't really about that in the way that it sort of seemed like it was going to be. And that can be a tough thing as a viewer, no matter what type of audience you are, when you go into something thinking that it's one thing and then it's sort of something else. You can feel deceived. And that can really result in a negative reaction. Or, it can be like, oh, all right, I thought it was about this, but this is me trying to outsmart, a movie before I see it. And I think sometimes a lot of us that do this for a living and have, academic and critical analysis of movies, sometimes we can feel like we're always one step ahead and we're always smarter because we've seen more movies and we know more things. That I don't know. I think it's almost inevitable that we kind of do that. I do it all the time where I feel like I know more, and it's an arrogant feeling sometimes when I do that. But with this, with the it's not really a Rashomon style examination, the way that all the points of view are broken down, because there are only the scant moments of where each of the things cross over. So it's not really saying anything about that specific experience or examination. What I really did love is not only how absolutely hilarious so much of the movie was, intentionally, I have to believe, but as a way to kind of, I don't know if it's lulling us or tricking us into taking something really terrifying and horrifying as the disappearance of all of these young kids, and finding a way to laugh at absurdity. But it's what it feels like. It's sort of what it feels like. I know I mentioned that I wish Amy Madigan hadn't been a part of the trailer, even with that brief, like 1 second flash of her. But there was something deeper and creepier at play with this, and why the gun violence and school shooting thing became sort of non-existent. Because what it reminded me much more of, with the clear clown face makeup, and I was like, oh, it's like, it looks like Baby Jane, or she's like Ruth Gordon in Rosemary's Baby, or any number of things. It began to feel more like John Wayne Gacy, and that relationship that we have with clowns, and the fact that the kids are in the basement. And then of course I think of the Sufjan Stevens song, and it started turning into something else completely different. And even when it gets so absurdly funny, when they are chasing her through the suburbs like Ferris Bueller, I couldn't really shake that John Wayne Gacy element. And then it became it just felt so much more sinister. And because you're not explaining her little twigs and witchcraft and anything, you don't have an opportunity as a viewer to kind of help fix it, or be like, don't do that. It's not that kind of horror movie. Even though anyone that goes in a basement, period, I don't know, good luck to you, period. You're taking your life into your own hands.
Okay. So I think this is as I've thought over the last couple of days, maybe one of the best films of the year. And I didn't think that when I was walking out. And it's so wild, and I'm not talking the different perspectives on this, because a lot of people have talked about already online, and Karen, you talked about it with your audience, like your audience was like not on this ride. My audience was fully leaned in, invested in this thing from the get-go, cheering, jumping at the right moments. It was honestly one of the more invested screenings I've been in a while. And I was kind of shocked by it, because the first half is a little slow in terms of trying to build to it, and is not the film that they're marketing until it becomes the film that they're kind of marketing, which is this horror movie. But it's a character study at the beginning of this thing. But after every chapter break, people were like, you could hear the collective breath, and then it was like they weren't breathing for that chapter, and then they would, so you could feel the energy of the place building up to which then the ending. I mean, it was ruckus. It was like watching a screening of, the Rocky Horror Picture Show, how crazy it was in my screening. And I was sitting there, and there were just moments where I was confused, but then I was, Eric, to your point, I was putting on my critical analysis thinking hat, and I was just trying to examine, like, what is this guy doing with this movie? And then I went, okay, well, I did what Karen did. I went and I didn't read a lot of the reviews. I tried to go and listen to Cregger himself. And so I listened to this 45-minute long conversation he had with Sean Fennessy on The Big Picture. He did an interview with Griffin over at The Playlist. He did a bunch of them. And I just started to realize that maybe this guy is intentionally or unintentionally, he's saying, I don't know I can't wait for this, for the audience to tell it to me. And like you're saying, Karen, but then also I'm thinking, well, if he says it's about gun violence, knowing the culture that we have today, certain people in this world are not going to go see this movie then. And they're not going to be able to go and interpret whatever they're supposed to be. So I think in some way it's a little bit Lynchian in go in, figure out what you think of the movie and tell me what it is. And I really know what it's about, but I'm not going to tell you. And maybe that's neither right nor wrong, but I think for a movie like this, that's okay. I also know that this is a very personal film for him. One of the original members of the Whitest Kids We Know passed away. And through that pain and understanding of loss, a sudden loss, he then went and started writing this script, and this story kind of unfolded from there. The movie I started thinking about a lot when I was watching this, and I don't know if either one of you have seen it this year, is I started thinking about David Cronenberg's The Shrouds when I was watching this a lot. And I was thinking about that movie, of how Cronenberg uses the death of his wife to build up a case as an atheist for there has to be a conspiratorial way in which death makes sense, because why would some being that we have no real understanding of or out of our control would take away the thing I love the most? And then that movie goes down so many rabbit holes to do that. And in this film, I was thinking about the pain of a mass event. It doesn't have to be a shooting. It could be a serial killing. It could be any type of tragedy that happens on a town. And how do we then all respond in such a way when that pure evil has really allowed itself to just penetrate into what is supposed to be the most innocent places in the world, which is just the suburbs? And how do people then react when that evil is still inflicting pain onto pretty much everyone long after those events have happened? And we can invite that as easy as to our tables. We can invite that into our schools. We can invite that into our community, and how that sort of lingers and hovers over everything as it goes on. And I was thinking about that a lot with the film, not necessarily just gun violence, but just trauma and how that evil is invited in through our culture, through our faults and flaws. And that's where I think the film for me lies. And if it's not about gun violence, even though I think that there are definite things that you can point out in this movie that is, and if he doesn't want to admit that, that's totally fine to him. It's not one of those I know better than the director things, but it's also like, dude, it's pretty obvious that it's there. And it's pretty obvious because once the movie like this comes into the public consciousness, there's no way to not take things and we over at Director Watch, we talk about movies that are 20, 30 years old, and then themes of today come into effect when you talk about some movies of the past. It doesn't mean that the artist ever intended it. I mean, we talked about recently as this week with Black Bag with Paul Verhoeven. When we released that episode, there's shots of Black Book, I'm sorry. At the end of that movie, there's shots of those characters, those Jewish characters getting bombed in Israel. Does Verhoeven intend of what's going on here now today to, almost 20 years later? No, he didn't. But it's interesting to reflect on the past and when those films were made and how they evolve from now. So I think that the movie is talking about a lot of things. And so when it's interesting to read online, when people are like, this movie's got nothing to say, I'm like, I think it's got a lot to say. Maybe it's probably got too much to say. But I am someone that I'm like, I rather you have a ton of ideas in your movie and I can go back and dissect it and think about it over and over again, rather than it be almost a one note thing, almost too much. Like I was thinking about, Karen, a movie that I know you don't like a lot, which is Eddington, in a movie, how like that thing is over and over again beating up pretty much the same message throughout its entirety. And for this, I felt there was more variety and more things to say and more things on the underline rather than on the surface of that movie. And I feel like it's interesting how we're all taking in commentaries this year, whether, social commentary, political commentaries, but within genre. So I really like the film, and I'm not usually one. Eric knows I don't have a lot, and you guys know I don't have a lot of time to go to the theaters again to see movies multiple times in a given year. I really want to see it again because maybe, Karen, you are right. Maybe because the shock value of Amy Madigan's character and some of the things in the end that I didn't expect, maybe I'll be able to dissect and figure out what I truly feel about those meanings, other than just it being pure evil, which it can just be about that, or it could just be on the second round an entertaining film, which was what I thought it was.
I have a question for both of you.
Yeah,
because we were just talking earlier about, or you were, that a big part of the inspiration of this was the death of his friend. And I want to know what your guys' thoughts are, both, again, as kind of people that do what we do. So we generally dig in for information a little bit more than the average viewer. How much of that type of information is important, or for the majority not even known when talking about the film? Is the film a better film or worse because we know some of the background of it? If a person just goes to the movies and will never know this bit of information, is their mileage of how they feel about a film more or less because of it? And same for us. Are we in a place of knowing too much about a person or bringing too much into a film? I wonder about that. I wonder about that with something like this, or kind of with anything. And I'm glad you brought up Eddington, because I think there is a great side conversation to be had about that.
Yeah. Karen, you want to go first?
Well, and I'm not going to dive into Eddington, but I will say currently my feelings about Zach Cregger are pretty similar to my feelings about Ari Aster as a filmmaker, where I think that they have some big ideas, but for me, they just don't carry those through in a way that is as thought out and as deep as I would like them to be. I think to your question though, Erik, I tend to not try to learn too much about the background of a movie before I watch it. And so I think it's kind of both. And I think going into a movie without knowing sort of what the inspirations were, what the references are, without having that background, I think a film, if it's a good film, it should be able to stand on its own for an audience without knowing what was in the filmmaker's brain when he sat down to write it and to make it. I have definitely had the experience a lot of times where I've been kind of less excited and impressed with the movie. And then when I learn more about it afterwards, then I'm like, wow, I had no idea. This is so amazing, and so I think that on an academic from an academic perspective, learning more about a movie can really enhance your experience with it, but that shouldn't be what a filmmaker is relying on in order to sell it to an audience.
Yeah, it's funny. It's almost like watching Drag Race and someone has this, this great, runway number, but then they have to explain everything about it because the judging panel wasn't getting it from the runway. And it's like, all right, so was this actually effective or not? Because you had to explain your entire thesis of it.
That's a
right,
good
yeah.
That's a crazy comparison at the front, and then it totally made sense by the
Weapons. It's just like drag
race. Put it on the fucking poster, No, I mean, you know what? To your point, I was talking with Sophia about this film, like the minute I got out of it, because she had seen it before myself, and Erik, you were in the middle of your screening, and we were exchanging some voicemails back and forth, and she was a little lesser on it at first than I was. And it was because she was reading into a lot of people comparing this to Magnolia, a lot of people comparing this to Rosemary's Baby, a lot of people comparing this to Pulp Fiction. And that happens a lot with films, right? Where we start hearing, well, it's like this movie only in this genre. And you're like, okay, well, if you love PTA or you love Magnolia, and it's like, okay, well, how is this like Magnolia? And I had that going into my theater, but I was thinking, okay, I need to like kind of scrub that from my memory as hard as I can, because I need to judge this movie just as this movie. And if those things pop up, then sure, they pop up, but I can't be like, I'm expecting the Magnolia of horror movies going into this thing. You know what I mean? And I think a lot of the stuff I know about Cregger's in the background and the creation of this was like Karen. It was after the fact. It was listening to the podcast and or reading those interviews to understand kind of the backstory and where he was coming from and the place he was at. This was a screenplay that was created or that was written before he shot Barbarian. So this has been something he's wanted to tell for a while, and he's sort of fine-tuned it. And he even admitted like the first pass that he went through was absolute garbage. And he had to really rework this and figure out from there. Knowing that background going in, if some people know that, I guess then they're just very informed critics or cinephiles or letterbox users at this point, because we live in that world that it's different than like Roger Ebert writing it in a review and telling us, when we were younger. But I try not to go in with as much of the little details as much as just like, I know who the filmmaker is. I know who the actors are. Maybe I know the plot synopsis. Erik knows this. I try to stay as far away from trailers as possible. Like Erik's like, you should watch that trailer. I'm like, no, I'm going to see that at like, right. I see that at Telluride. I don't need to see the fucking trailer for that thing. I'm like going to see it in 3 weeks. You know what I mean? Or I'm going to see it at TIFF. Like, I don't need to see it. And he's like, just watch the trailers, 3 minutes. It's, don't be stupid. You know what I mean? So we have that back and forth, but I try to go in blind as possible to these things from actual footage. I feel like I've seen the entire film of either The Odyssey or The Devil Wears Prada 2 at this point online, but I'm going to try to go in as much as I can with a blind slate going into it. And especially if it becomes a movie that I'm really curious about, like this film, I don't want to see that much going into it, or I don't want to know too much about it going in. I mean, the gun violence angle was kind of what I deduced from the teaser trailer. I mean, it's kind of hard not to with the premise of 17 kids going missing in an elementary school. And, this is like a recurring thing that happens in our country now. It's normalized at this point. Sadly, I mean, like we get the news updates every 2 to 3 months of still the incompetency that happened over in Uvalde here in South Texas. So it is very close to home. And I mean, like Eric knows, I watched a documentary about the Uvalde mom that ran into that school at South by Southwest. So that issue is always here. And I kind of suspected that some of that would be here, but I obviously knowing how Barbarian was, it wasn't going to totally be about that. I mean, that movie is about Airbnbs. It's about cancel culture. It's about gentrification. It's about, I mean, setting it in Detroit. I mean, like, come on, like, you're like, it's hard not to think about all those themes. And then you could also just be like, it's a really fucked up, scary movie at the end of the day too. And I kind of feel like that's what that is about. And I think that he's a much more entertaining packager of material than someone like Ari Aster, which is like, I would never like tell a regular normal person go see Eddington or Beau is Afraid, but I would be like, if you like horror movies, you'd probably go see this because you'd have a fun time with it probably at the end of the day more than you would have with those. So
I'd like to I guess now, after hearing both of your perspectives, I just want to go back in and give some specifics to what I was talking about, and maybe we can talk about some of these things. So it was interesting, Eric, because you were talking about John Wayne Gacy. I was getting Pennywise the Clown vibes.
That too. From
Amy Madigan, who, by the way, I have to say, as much as I have a lot of complaints about this, I think Amy Madigan is perfection. I really loved her. I thought the performances in general were good. And yeah, I think that when this movie is funny, it is intentionally. So I saw a couple people say, oh, it's unintentionally funny. I'm like, what was unintentional about any of the humor? It was all very like,
well, Karen, to your point, I listened to, not again to bring into context, but everyone was talking. I agree that I think the movie is very funny. Cregger's was in that interview with Fennessy, and he talked about, like, I didn't intentionally try to make this a comedy or have any comedy in it.
Comedy.
Or have any comedy in it because, but he's like,
the one thing I'm trying to give him credit for.
No, but I was fascinated. He was just like the moment Brolin wakes up from the dream, one of the funniest moments I've laughed at because like chapter ends is right. And it's honestly like it's what I would say is the audience. But anyway, go back to what you were saying, Karen.
Yeah, but what I was thinking about a lot, though, is, okay, so there are these, as we've been talking about, there's these allusions to, gun violence and the violence that has been permeating schools and all of that. And there's so much interesting commentary that can be done there in a movie like this. You also have this introduction of this one little boy, the only kid in the class who's still there, which as soon as as soon as the teacher walks in, you see that there's one kid there. I'm like, oh, this whole thing is centering around this child for some reason. I was wrong about why and how, because I thought that the fact that he was probably being bullied was going to have a big thing to do with it, and then it really doesn't. And so it's like there are these little nuggets along the way, but ultimately what's really happening isn't anything deeper than this witch comes into town and is just feeding off of this energy, which could also be an interesting idea, except that I don't think Cregger did much more with that than just be spooky and shocking.
I think to that, I mean, this is what I was thinking about in, what I wanted to talk about on the podcast and what my feelings were, because there can definitely be a sense to over explain and give backstory. Like if we had a whole section that was just
a chapter for her,
a chapter on Amy Madigan, I would have been really disappointed, because I want the thing that's spooky about villainry is less the the knowing of the trauma that got them there, and it's the absolute unknowing. I mean, it's the and the unexplainable.
I totally agree with that. And I'm not saying that I wanted to know more about Agnes, because I love not. We don't know anything about Pennywise the clown. I hope Welcome to Derry doesn't ruin that in in a month or two. But yeah, I'm totally fine.
I fear it will.
I fear it will,
so too.
Karen.
I'm sure. But that's the thing, is like, I'm not saying I wanted to know more about Agnes. What I found a little bit frustrating was that the reason Alex ends up helping her is because he's trying to protect his parents, not because he gets any sort of a sense of like, oh, wait, I can get back at my class for bullying me or something like that, which I think could have been a little bit more, even if that had been not where he ultimately went, if there had just been a little bit of something kind of connecting that. Instead, he does this to protect his mom and dad because she's threatening to kill his parents. And that's it.
Yeah.
And it's not any more than that.
Sidebar, incredible performance from Carrie Christopher, the kid that plays Alex. Absolutely.
Incredible.
I was just like thinking about this child as an actor having to feed his parents and feed the kids in the basement. And it was just like, this is harrowing. I was just like, all I could think about was what this kid is going to go through for the rest of his life. I understand that. I feel like I agree with you. I understand that. I think each of these people in their sections, we are given a certain amount of information, but it isn't, I don't think, a lot of new information that makes anything. There aren't revelations. I'll say that. Austin Abrams' Junkie is basically exactly the person that a very basically shaped junkie would be. All aspects of him are. I think maybe Alden Ehrenreich's cop Paul might have a few more shades to him than we thought, because he is pretty bad at his job. But that kind of opens then the really fascinating door of the police in general, who seem to have absolutely zero handle on even how to approach this investigation in the most basic ways.
Yeah.
When Josh Brolin makes, the little red lines on the map, I was like,
it's the easiest detective work you could do. Yeah.
How is this not the easiest detective work? Where did each of these kids run to? Is there a cross section? They're all, and that's where you are as an audience. Being
and did they only pull the ring cameras from the homes of the missing kids?
Exactly. There's all these other things, and I think that's sort of where that's where it's a great way for suspense films and thrillers and horrors for the audience participation to kind of get you amped up and
involved
and moving and excited and also angry, because there's once that starts happening, you're just like, is there any CC footage in this suburban town? Which I have to imagine there would be, because these houses are huge and massive. This is a gated community kind of place that feels like they would be very careful about their neighborhood.
But I mean, sorry, Karen, go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say, that was another one of my frustrations with this movie, though, is that I feel like there's so much that could have been done with the setting, and I feel like this town is completely devoid of personality.
I will say this
intentionally, maybe.
Maybe so.
That's generous of you, I think.
I was sitting there. I was thinking a lot about. It was hard for me not to think of the tragedy that happened here in Uvalde, and so when you guys are talking about the corruption with these cops, I'm like, yeah, there were like hundreds of cops outside of that elementary school. Nobody went in, and all those kids died. So, and the cover up by the governor and the cover up by, fucking shitbag Ted Cruz and all these people, like it's still ongoing. Like, it took a year for people to actually get in trouble for something like that. So when Brolin has that meeting with the police chief, and you realize the police chief is his son-in-law is Alden Ehrenreich, and his connection of having a past relationship with the teacher, and how all this small townness is connected. That even the FBI comes in, they do like the laziest search, because for a parent like Brolin, how many times in like a movie, like even like Prisoners or movies in general, but even in life, do these parents have to do more and use their brains more than the resources of these people who are paid professionals to do so? And the only real justice comes at the hands of people that are actually involved, become essentially obsessive over this, and rightfully so, because they've lost the thing that is the most value to them. And Brolin, he's not doing well at his job, his marriage, he's sleeping in his child's room, like all those little things, without having like a giant emotional scene of him, like, with his wife or stuff like that, very dramatized. Like it's a little bit more subtle things like that. Obviously the troubled past of Julia Gardner's character, and that all catching up to her, Alden Ehrenreich's, as this case is, there's a moment where Ehrenreich and Gardner are in the car, and he's like, nothing's really happened. And in terms of new developments, but it's really about like, this community is going to kind of just move on. Like they're not really going to find the answers unless you start poking around, because that's usually how it is. Because 9 times out of 10, if you haven't found them 48 hours or 72 hours after the event, then the gravest of things happen. And this movie then takes that to, well, if you haven't found them after a couple of weeks, they're probably getting soup in the basement. And it is very funny that, like, literally one of the funniest scenes of the movie to me is when they're cleaning the house because the FBI is coming over, the kids getting out of the basement and jumping over the fence, and like like, where did she stash them is a very funny thing, but for those couple of hours. But also it's so like, how do you not see this? How do you not investigate this? How do you not keep an eye on the house? How do you not keep an eye on the teacher? Like Brolin even says it, like she should be primary subject number one. But then there's like, well, she didn't pull them out of those houses. Those kids walked out. And it's like, okay, well, connect where they walked to. And that's what he does. And so I don't know. I found that to be kind of a little bit of the, I guess the reasoning behind some of those decisions by Cregger here. Is just like, there's institutional failures in our normal lives, let alone for these characters in this even small town with probably smaller resources than like the city of like San Antonio, or where it was shot in Atlanta, but it's supposed to be this small Pennsylvania town, So
I'm
sorry.
Go ahead, Karen.
Okay. I just wish that, because I agree, police are incompetent, especially these police are incompetent. They're clearly not putting in the energy to investigate where the fuck these kids went. But I wish that had not. I think the conversation where Brolin goes and sits down with the chief, it's frustrating to me watching that scene, because the chief is making valid points. What is it that you think this teacher did? She's not the person to be focusing on. And to me, the real energy in that scene shouldn't have been just about him being out to get this teacher because he thinks that she's the reason. It should have been focused more on the fact that the cops are investigating jack shit about this case.
Mm-hmm. I think that is,
that's what
I think that's what he's getting at, is like, you're not even doing the basic thing here, let alone fucking anything else. You know what I mean?
That whole thing gets dismissed though, because then the chief is just like, what do you think she did? And that's all that,
well, there is that brief
conversation really is about.
And when
that conversation,
well, it feels like this isn't the first time that they've had that conversation, because there's that brief scene in the Alden Ehrenreich section where you can hear the chief talking with, I think maybe a special counsel or a counselor or something, being like, you're gonna talk to this guy again. Like, how many times are we gonna have to keep having these conversations? Maybe it's the FBI agent.
I love when Brolin asks and says, "Why haven't I gotten any updates?" And then the sheriff's like, "Because you don't get updates."
Yeah, because it's our job to get them.
I love that, but it's great. I do think one of the strongest components of the film is how damaging it is about the lack of police effort. I think it's one of the best parts of the film, because literally Toby Huss is just sitting at his desk going through newspapers and whatever in the most ineffectual and disinterested way.
Yeah.
And it's not like he's sad and feeling like he's given up because it's not going to happen. It is just like pure apathy. And that is the worst, I think, part of any of this. Whenever there is a mass shooting or anything like this, that feels like it's so above anyone's ability to comprehend, much less figure out, that you become almost not catatonic, but you just feel that there is no answer, there is no resolution. And that's kind of how that's kind of what was like washing over me in thinking about this. And it wasn't like, giving the captain, letting him off the hook for feeling like that. It was just this is how it feels every single time.
Yeah. I
agree with that.
So I wanted to go back to you guys talking about Alex, which I do think Kerry Christopher performance is absolutely fantastic here. And when I was watching it, I couldn't help but think of, obviously, when these massive tragedies happen, people are left behind. But then also how they are probably, how isolated he is at the beginning of the film, and how this tragedy, it happens, it can be something small that isolates him, and then it could be something then that's larger that isolates as well too. I think that the movie, he clearly loses his parents just as much as these parents lose their kids. And so for me, it was a lot of mirroring the fact that, when he gives up these kids, there's that sense of, okay, I'm the only survivor left. And then and so what does one do? They try to fix the problem, and in fixing problems, sometimes you can create even bigger problems. You can also literally repeat a cycle of abuse or trauma, and that's the case. And that's really the only time I think this movie explores any sort of traumatic event, but it doesn't do it in a way that's beating the audience up with said trauma like I think a lot of other films do. I think it does it in a real interesting way, and an empathetic way to Alex, because he goes from then taking care of his parents to then taking care of everyone and taking care of the memories of people and the lost souls. And so I think that's really interesting about, like, when you see these the survivors of these tragedies, parents, when you see like for Columbine or Parkland or any of these places, and they're carrying on these memories through their actions, whether it's care in the face of pure evil, or it's activism, or it's just being just a sense of duty to make sure that their silence is still lived upon. So I kind of thought that was what he was personifying a little bit as a character. Maybe Cregger didn't have that intention, but it totally feels like that when you're then seeing him take care of the supposed missing children, and then the affected parents and murdered, like essentially they're murdered in this film by this generational evil that we've allowed into their house. And I mean, what's more of a generational evil than the violence that we inherit as a society over the generations of not fixing this issue? I mean, it is the I think the ongoing albatross around my generation of not being able to fix this and make this so much so that when you have children going to school, you don't know when you're putting them on that bus if this is the last time you're going to pick them up. I mean, the one of the sadder moments is when he is having to first walk home by himself for the first time, and that's when you know that the squeaky clean, suburban life that we've seen him have with his parents, they joke and they have a really great relationship, that's gone. And that darkness has set in, and that's where Glass really can, sort of reign her terror. And I think that, again, Madigan is perfect and campy and disturbing, and also, while not giving her too much backstory, you learn just enough about her vulnerabilities as a character, and it's completely within the rules that they sort of set up. It doesn't feel like they overextended, or like it didn't get convoluted for me. And I feel like some movies can get really like, oh, you gotta go to 1,000 links to get to the conclusion that we find at the end of the film. And then I will say this, and Karen, I know you're not a big fan of some of this guy's movies, but the ending to me did feel a little bit like it was a Inglourious Bastards, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, the kids destroying her, and the people that are I mean, that's how I felt. I was watching, I was like, well, the one that kills her in the end is the last giant victimized group that she's sucking their life source and soul out of. She's literally feeding on those children. Yeah,
it's wish fulfillment as a viewer, because something like this in real life would never happen.
Yeah.
So you're getting a reprieve and a resolution that can only happen in the movies.
Yeah, exactly. And so
visually, the children are ripping her apart, but it's Alex who is doing that. They're under his control at that point.
Yeah, it's using them to finally get rid of, and what's happened to them, their pain, in order to get rid of this evil once and for all.
Can we talk about that entire sequence when she, really goes full Glenn Close in The Deliverance, and then is running through the neighborhood? I was losing my fucking mind.
I thought I would. Who would have thought?
It's incredible.
Yeah,
and it is hilarious.
And it wasn't on
the sequence of the whole movie.
It wasn't on the page either. He came up with that on the day of, and they extended it 4 days, and it was a nightmare to shoot because they were literally about to wrap. But he's like, it kind of needed to be bigger and more, and that's kind of interesting to create that. Then, there on the spot, and they built these 4 houses that they totally destroyed, and the tracking shots of that are incredible.
Yeah, yes, the POV of that was like literally like the Naked Gun police car. That was what I felt like through the whole sequence. I was like, I had just seen Naked Gun last week, and I'm like, the absurdity of this is
to that level,
absolutely brilliant. I was losing my mind.
Well, I had heard that one thing, or like, the ending's crazy, and how many 9 times out of 10, right, do we ever hear a movie's got a crazy ending and it ever live up to our expectations?
But it is, because it really holds back on the gore for a long
there is like a brutal death in the movie that happens that I was not a fan of, and they don't really show
it's the literal gay bashing.
Yeah, which was
that's the thing that begins all of it. That's really like where like, here we go. This is the moment where everything is completely all reins are off.
Yeah, that's why I was also like, so you're just saying that this evil is
well, another one of the things that little girl narrator says at the beginning is a lot of people die in really weird ways, and I kept waiting and waiting for that to happen. So then when Marcus kills his husband, that's like weird and horrific, and then a couple of, like, there's not actually nearly as many deaths as I thought there were going to be. And then a couple of them, they just get shot. Marcus gets run over by a car in the middle of the street. And so I kept waiting, like, where are all the really weird deaths? So then, like, in the end, with Agnes, it's like, okay, all right, I thought there was going to be more of this.
But
and
she didn't lie.
I did appreciate that.
The long return of investment on that line.
Very.
You're like, oh, you know.
Yeah. I mean, I'm also such a huge supporter of hagsploitation, so this goes right up there with me. I love it. I love it.
I thought that was wonderful, and I was like, wow, this is. I don't know if it was intentional for him to be giving us Erik's latest obsession for Halloween this year, but like for real, this character. I mean, it was very like, it was very like how almost like a play on like Mary Poppins, Mrs. Doubtfire, Nanny McPhee, sort of this she's got the bags and everything. She comes in, he's literally seeing her at night from, you know, the Uber, like come in and it's like that sort of twist on that go to hell, and like
it felt more like that Brandy movie. Was that earlier this year?
Oh, The Room Next Door
with Catherine Hunter.
Yeah,
is that what it was called?
Yeah, it felt more like that. Yeah,
much better executed
or whatever.
Yeah, the much better executed here. I think that movie was.
I also loved the Justin Long cameo. Excellent, absolutely fantastic.
My theater erupted with laughter with that. They were just like, they were like, oh, it was the Cliff Booth, or it was the Leonardo DiCaprio thing in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. They were all pointing. It
was great. I loved that.
I will say, I had a chance to see it again the next night. I didn't go, but like they had an interactive screening in Austin.
Oh, in Austin. Yeah.
At the small like schoolhouse, and they gave the soup cans and the bells and the potato peeler, which is one of the great kills scenes.
The potato peeler scene is so ridiculous because it takes so long for her to do it, and then she does it twice. Nice. And it's just I loved it because it's an impossibility. Also, I'm like, where do I get that potato peeler?
Because I could never get mine that sharp. You know what I mean?
That was amazing. Well done there.
I would take that, not use it as evidence. I'd take that home. You know, I'd be using that at Thanksgiving later this year.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And not on potatoes. Absolutely.
Is there anything else you guys want to mention about this thing? I think we've done a good job, but I wonder how it's going to do. I mean, I wonder if audiences are. I mean, I think people are. I mean, it is so prime for our horror movies.
It did well in its previews. I think it was like 5.7 million. Pretty good. So
horror movies,
I think it's going to make it like 40 million.
Which is what its budget is, so that's pretty good. Yeah, I mean,
I'm just really curious to see what the cinema score is, since horror movies always have such terrible cinema scores, even if they are
hits.
Obviously, very well liked, like this movie is.
Yeah.
So, I want to see what that's going to be.
The next thing Cregger is doing is he is doing Resident Evil.
Sigh.
He is not adapting what they did in the films. He's more doing a original take from the video games, and then he's got supposedly a sci-fi horror film that he's going to do after that.
Sure.
But he has said, I listened to the interview with Fantasy. He's very excited about Resident Evil. He said that it's much more of an original film than people are going to think, but he wants people to see it. He's very excited about that, but he's really excited about the sci-fi film, is what he said. He said, and I quote, "the best thing I've written so far." So I can't wait for Karen to see that one. I think that's the one that's really going to turn her.
Well, I don't need to know what he thinks about it. I just care what I think about it.
Karen, can I ask you about, because we are at such an interesting point with horror, right? Like I mentioned, we've got this sort of one note, I think, thing that that the indie horror films are doing. You have the establishment franchises that always either seem to get rebuilt or rebooted, and then you have certain people like this or Jordan Peele who get to make an original thing every now and then. M. Night Shyamalan also as well gets to do that, sort of establishment people in the genre now. where do you hope with after a movie like this and the sort of movies that we've seen? Because I did read your thing on Letterboxd, Karen, where everyone is talking about like this is the horror the year of horror again, and you're like, I don't believe that. So what do you hope for the genre to do going forward, and hopefully, not continue upon in certain tropes that you've seen that you don't
I
like?
want to say that I love horror. I love really good horror
I know you
movies.
do. I know you do.
And I would like to go more Jordan Peele than Zach Cregger. I think directors like Peele, you put me on the spot, so now I can't think of any other directors that I like right now.
Carly
In the
Farja, like The
genre.
Substance.
Yeah,
Right?
that's a good one too. I think that they are really smart and they use satire and commentary in very effective ways to tell their stories. And I would just like to see more directors do that. And you can have very shocking and entertaining horror movies that are also very smart.
Yeah. Eric, are
I
you happy?
mean,
Yeah.
if things had gone the way that they were originally supposed to, it would have been a Jordan Peele production of Weapons.
If he wanted this movie
And
in the
maybe it
bidding
would have
war.
been better. Who
Yeah,
knows?
yeah.
I don't know.
He wanted this thing. He fired everybody, right? His management and everybody.
He-
Because of
Yeah,
that.
it was
was
pretty wild.
Pretty brutal how
Mhm.
they didn't get it. Yeah. Well, I also
Yeah.
think Eggers is another person too.
Eggers is great. Yeah.
That
No,
was
see, Eggers is an interesting one because even if I don't love his movies, I still really admire them. Like, I don't
the craft of him.
love
Yeah.
The Lighthouse, but I admire that movie. I think it's
I love
beautifully
Lighthouse.
shot. There's so much good about it. I don't
It's probably
enjoy
my
it,
favorite.
but I think it's really, really well made. So
Eric, that's your favorite of his?
I think it's probably my favorite of his. Yeah. What
I
I,
think-
do wonder whether it's Eggers or Zach Cregger, who clearly now has a style after these two films of how he wants a movie to unfold for the audience. And Eggers' style, very specific.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to say that these styles are limited, but they are limited. These men are
These men's.
these men's.
These men's.
men's. I was going to say men's stories. These men are
I like how you were
stories.
like, continue. Sorry.
Yes, it was almost what I think you were thinking of. They're writing stories that are in a very safe comfort zone for themselves, I think.
Yeah.
Which isn't really it's not a knock. I'm not really knocking them by saying that, but I do wonder if we get to a point which is where we got to with M. Night Shyamalan, where the twist became the thing, and
he became a joke
because of it, and completely overrided his career for a really long time. And I feel like that's what could quite easily happen with Eggers and Cregger's.
Well, the thing about when I talked with Eggers last year for Nosferatu, and I asked him about, where things are at in terms of independent filmmaking, he goes, "Oh, it's bleak." He was not sugarcoating it like some other directors were. And this is a guy that had made successful films in genre. And he's like, if you don't have an IP twist to it, they're not going to greenlight it. And then he's doing a werewolf movie following Nosferatu. Cregger is doing literally Resident Evil. Peele seems to be the only one, because he's also a producer on his project. He basically like owns Monkey Paw, that he can like greenlight whatever he wants. But even like M. Night Shyamalan's next movie is a Nicholas Sparks horror romance book with Jake Gyllenhaal, which makes absolutely no fucking sense. But
crazy.
But
that's kind of what I mean. These men are their own IPs.
Yeah, they have the name brand, and as long as you can then turn from Zach Cregger, the mind behind Barbarian,
the whitest
and Weapons.
kids you know.
Well, really, but most audiences aren't going to know him for that. They're going to know him for Weapons and Barbarian, at least modern audiences going forward. And so, I would hope that we have more of those, and obviously we have more female voices in that sphere. I mean, I thought, and Eric and I have seen this film already, so it's not like helpful, but I would have thought like Julia Ducournau was a voice in that horror independent genre, and
Ugh.
but her latest film Alpha we saw at Cannes is maybe one of the worst films of the year. It is definitely one of those films that I think about when I talk about trauma porn and how easy that trope is played so much over and over again. Like anytime I see a movie with trauma, I just think of that quote with a compilation of Jamie Lee Curtis saying it for the Halloween press. But
I think I wish Jennifer Kent had
oh yes,
a stronger following from the Babadook.
And then the Nightingale, which is
the Nightingale's also
that is a
it's
hard
good.
movie. It's a great movie, but that was a hard watch.
But it doesn't feel like that she, obviously this is clearly a gender aligned thing, but she was never really able to take her
next
style
step.
And turn it and just continue to turn it into exciting and wonderful work.
It will be interesting after The Substance what Carly Farge does next, because I think that she's almost like where Peele is at. She's took the step to the Oscars with horror, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And now she's going to be able to take it. I mean, she was at Cannes, Eric. I think she was in our screening of Pillion, and she got a massive standing ovation in that room because I was like,
everyone was at Pillion.
Yeah, everyone except you for that screening. But
no, I was at the one with Paul.
Yeah, I was at this. Well, I was at the one.
That's right. You were at the other one. That's
with right. Pedro Pascal, who's in every movie, and Ari Aster, who's got his, and then Carly Farge, who was, got the bigger applaud than the two of them. There you go. There you go. It's probably also home turf, but still, she also is coming off of like carrying that movie from Cannes against all odds to Oscar win and nominations and everything. And
I'll be curious to see what she does next,
and if she keeps her style in there too, which I think is great within those first two films of hers. And so it'll be very interesting to see. But I do, even if we don't all like this film, it is just nice to see more original horror film. I also like Ty West is probably on a lower end, somebody like with A24, that because he had a literal whole trilogy made in the last couple of years is probably another name. But anyway, it's just nice to see. This is, I think, maybe the most important genre and the most successful genre that we have going right now. You look at like how this movie will do. Most horror films, I mean, Sinners is technically categorized as a horror film. It's the one that
technically that is a horror movie.
Well, I mean, there's so much more that's going on in Sinners outside of just a horror film for me. But yes, it is. If you just had to strip it down, it's probably.
I think that's true of any good horror movie.
Exactly. But
I think Nia DaCosta is somebody that I think is
in 28 years,
a really interesting trajectory going, from Candyman to the Marvels to 28 Years Later and Hedda. That's super cool.
Yeah.
That's super, super cool.
She was one I was going to bring up too.
Mm-hmm. It would be very interesting to see how she does. What is that? The Bone Temple that comes out, and they've already shot it. So it comes out next year. What a title just for you, Eric. What a title.
What a title. I feel like I'm going to be tricked about what that means going in. It's certainly not what I want it to mean.
But
I'd like to see more horror from Karin Kasama too.
Yeah, I would like to see. I would also like to see this love and embrace of horror that we've had and sort of resurgence from like the dark days of like the early 2000s or the late 2000s, early 2010s. This resurgence that we've had, I would like this to be extended to other genres. I mean, like Eric, you talked about The Naked Gun. I would hope that the studio comedy and decent comedies would be able to come back, and we'd have some interesting filmmakers dabble into that. And hope that we can see other struggling genres get to the level where I think horror is at, where I think horror really is at the tip top for audiences. It's less so, I think, than even superhero movies to a certain extent. It's like dinosaurs and horror movies. You can make those right now, and they work out for so many audiences.
It doesn't matter. You can just keep going.
Yeah.
I did really like what Sean Fennessy said last night.
Yes.
And yeah, he said
Sean's
it just
great
read a
friend
few
of the pod.
weapons reviews written by younger critics. They seem to be concerned that the movie isn't about anything, quote unquote. This is what 10 years of elevated horror hand-holding has created. I thought that was a pretty
Astute.
on the point look at what has happened with horror, which is very popular. And that, to your point earlier, the A24 neonification of horror having to be so much more than a Friday the 13th slasher, and having very simple aspirations as to the hows and whys.
Yeah. And I actually think that right there is my biggest problem with this movie, is not the fact that it's not about anything. It's that it's trying to be about something, but also not being about anything.
That's fair. I can get that. I also just think that those two is like, so maybe
that's fair.
That's very fair, Karen. But I also think too, like, I think because of those elevated horror films, even a movie like this that is campy and silly and over the top, there has to be this level of grounded drama that's inside. Everybody needs Hereditary. And it's like, not every damn horror movies are messy. They're fun. They're campy. They're violent. They're silly, goofy. There's a guy that's got a green and red sweater that runs around with knives on his hands in your dreams. You know what I mean? There's a mass killer that you can't kill.
That's me. That was just
Eric last week.
That was me.
That was him after 2 martinis. But
pretty much
only 2.
Only I was right. You know. But the point is, it's like it's built on camp. It's supposed to be like a little bit fun, and I think the super seriousness of that in themes, if like people aren't grabbing it, or sometimes getting whacked in the head with it and having to examine certain things. It's like when certain directors that make dramas come out and they want everything like spilled to them. Like I mentioned Lynch before. It's like, how do they feel when they watch his movies? What the hell, you know, there's no manual to a David Lynch movie, because it's like those movies, I've reviewed those movies on podcasts with Jay before. I could probably tell you everything I said on those shows were wrong, and that's okay, because that's what I brought to those damn movies. You know what I mean?
I think before we started recording, we were talking about the Final Destination movies. Those are they're stupid and they're fun. And that's all they need to be.
Exactly.
And they work.
And you don't hear people like, well, the logic of this thing doesn't make sense. It's like, who gives a shit? It's Final Destination. You know what I mean? Like
there is a whole, you know,
but that's built in the franchise, you know,
to be had about our giddiness with horror movie deaths and how much we like them, how much of that is escapism, how they're funny sometimes, or
I think it's somewhat relief.
Is it, you know, or you know, because I don't think that what's happening in Final Destination movies is a whole lot of scary stuff. It is like at the beginning, like the idea of a shard of glass in a glass of
Eric, I've never been able
ice water or whatever. That is a neat thing that can just absolutely crawl into your brain like a little worm and kind of eat away at you, versus, you know, bigger crazy things like a piano falling on you.
Who hasn't been afraid of being sucked into an MRI machine though?
Who hasn't been
okay, but that happening in real life just like a few weeks ago.
It did, like the week after the movie came out.
How about when
is this real life?
How about when you're driving and it's one of those 18-wheelers like carrying things that happened in like the second film? You're like, and you move to the other lane and you speed past that fucker because you're like, I'm not tempting God here today. I'll tell you that.
No, but
I'm not tempting her. You know?
It's one of those wonderful things, though, where that is so embedded in our collective conscious that even though the likelihood of it is so tiny, you'll never be able to shake it. I think anybody that is I don't know, whatever,
Even
30
people
years
who,
or older.
yeah. Well, even I have friends who have never watched a single Final Destination movie, but they've all seen that log truck
We have all seen the
scene,
log thing, yeah.
and it's terrifying. And they also do the same thing, like change lanes, whatever.
But Eric,
I love when people take pictures of log trucks in front of them while they're driving, and I'm like, you are tempting fate.
Exactly.
I do think though, going back to Sean, who we've had on Director Watch a couple times, and he's absolutely fantastic. And Eric and I see him every year at Telluride, and he's great at dissecting a lot of issues and problems and pointing them out on his show over at the Ringer. He's kind of hitting at a point sometimes too that it becomes, I think, frustrating for this group here, and a lot of us is this frustration of younger critics or younger viewers not being able to don't have enough history, or they don't have enough familiarity within genre, or they don't have enough familiarity within the directors or influences, because this movie's got tons of influences thrown all around it. And you, Karen, and Eric, myself, we can all see those influences because we probably seen all those films, because Cregger is like around my age or maybe a little bit older than myself.
He's 44.
He's 44. Okay, so he's just a smidge over than myself. He's 10 years older. But he has some of these directors, they have that immediacy to show all their influences or what they've inspired or talk about them. And it is interesting of some of them going out there and like, well, this movie has nothing to say. Well, it's like, well, if anything, it has something to say. It's that it's also wearing its influences maybe on its sleeve a little too much. But can you identify those without somebody else pointing them out in another review that was posted 2 weeks ago before you saw the film, because you saw that it had 100% on Rotten Tomatoes? I think there's also a little bit of like that too, of like people are like, oh, it's 100%, you say, well, let me go and see this movie. And I joked online, I was like, who's going to be the poor soul that breaks this 100 degree, and then I had like 3 or 4 responses be like, it'll be I, said the critic. And I'm like, that's not the point. It's just a joke. Like, because somebody's going to, I think back of like when Lady Bird was at 100% and some guy wrote a C review or C plus review and then put it rotten anyway, just to put the point. And that's kind of where we're at with it. So some of that commentary online is extremely disingenuous as well too, and wanting to be contrarian. That's
people that aren't reviewing the film, they're reviewing reviews.
Exactly. Which I feel like a lot of people, there's always these waves of like, people are very positive when a movie comes out. Then, we as a group see this, where then the second wave comes in and people are maybe more, in the middle on it. And then there's definitely a wave of people that come out and they're like, well, that wasn't, a movie that walked on water, and it's funny how that happens, where like literally the same people, even from the same sources or same cities or same locations or same screenings, are all saying the same thing out there, So,
well, I think sometimes it's the hype machine can be really just dangerous and have such a negative.
But if you're going to blame anybody, just blame Griffin. His quote's been everywhere for this damn thing, so it's really Griffin's fault. And
I just saw Joey Gentili say Amy Madigan should be nominated for Best Supporting Actress for Weapons, full stop. And so that now pretty much ruins my entire love of Amy Madigan and the movie. So I can't like it anymore. So everything I have said,
please don't say that name.
I take back.
Don't say the name twice more, otherwise they're going to show up like Beetlejuice into the podcast. So, but I think that's where we're going to wrap. Karen,
rap on me talking about Joey Gentili.
See, Yay! You say it one more time, we're gonna get into the Zoom. Karen,
he's gonna snap me like a little twig.
I will say the bowl of water was a crazy.
The bowl of water.
Can I have a bowl? And I'm like, what the fuck are you gonna do with that bowl, lady?
It's a weird thing. I've just like made amends with it. It's all good. Just give me a bowl. Thanks, Queen.
Just letting her into your house. Would never do that, by the way. Don't let them in. Never do it.
Yeah.
Karen, can you tell everybody where they can find you and all your work on the internet?
Yeah, you can find my written reviews at awardswatch.com. You can find me talking about this movie and others, the Watch and Talk podcast, and also Citizen Dame. And you can find me on social media on Letterboxd, Instagram, and Blue Sky at Karen M. Peterson.
Erik?
At awardswatch.com. That's where I live. I live there. Actually, it's the basement of awardswatch.com. I'm being fed chicken noodle soup by Ryan daily. That is how I survive.
Damn right.
Yeah.
Right. It's the chunky noodle soup, actually. It's not.
Yeah, I don't like the chunky. I don't like the angel hair either. So
that was no. What about if I just gave you tomato soup? Little cheese?
Without a grilled cheese sandwich?
I would blend in the grilled cheese through a blender for a straw for you.
Blend in. Yeah, I don't like where this is going.
Fold the cheese in too. Fold the cheese.
You gotta fold the cheese.
You fold it in.
You fold the cheese.
You fold it in. Devad, you can find me.
Everything.
You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd, Blue Sky at Ryan McQuade 77. You can find all my work here at awardswatch.com. You can find, if you like podcast, Director Watch. We just released Black Book. Great episode. Next week, we're talking Elle, which is a super chill movie, not controversial at all. Nothing really crazy to dive into with that film in our Verhoeven movie series. And iTunes, Spotify, 5-star reviews over on the website. Please sign up for the newsletter. It's the best place to get all the news, reviews, interviews, all that stuff sent to you all in one place when Erik decides to do it over at awardswatch.com. Next week, we'll be back. We're going to be doing a preview episode, a Telluride preview episode. It's all coming, folks. It's fall movies.
We are so close. It's almost there.
It's gonna be here before you know it. We're gonna be at all these places, and Erik is going to have to put up with me in person. And it's some would say it's his penance, you know.
I'm sending my body double. Clone.
We'll be back next week. There's going to be a busy house. There's going to be some special guests, and I'm looking forward to talking about what we're planning on seeing up in the mountains. Thank you all so much for listening, and we will see you all next time.